Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The European Union is intensifying efforts to nudge Balkan nations towards joining the bloc. EU leaders will be discussing their investment plans for the Balkans at the Western Balkans Summit in Brussels on Wednesday. Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Serbia all have official EU candidate status. Kosovo is also considered a potential candidate. However, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić is one of the most openly pro-Russian leaders in the Balkans. Convincing him to introduce pro-European reforms will be one of the toughest challenges for the European Union. Why is the EU so keen to persuade the Balkan countries? And what are the risks and opportunities of including Serbia in the European fold? Well, to explore these and related questions, I'm joined by Spasimir Domaradzki, political scientist, University of Warsaw. Mr. Domaradzki, thank you very much for taking the time and welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So what's so important about the Balkans? Why is the EU so keen on getting them on board?
Well, the Balkans are extremely important because if you look on the map, they're in practical terms surrounded by the EU, and the EU is their main economic partner. Most of these countries are de facto very strongly incorporated into the European Union economy and political processes, and in that sense having them outside of the bloc is an element of potential destabilization that of course the EU and its member states would like to avoid. Having, on the other hand, these countries in the EU would create a completely different perspective in which, in a sense, one of the last steps for European unification will be accomplished.
Okay, well, I mean, that's interesting. You use the phrase European unification. What does that mean? I mean, does that mean the whole of the European continent? And if so, are there no exceptions?
You know, it was one thing to talk about the European integration before 2022, and now one thing that becomes apparent is that whether we like it or not, the confrontational nature of relations with Russia brought back the geopolitical narrative into international relations. That means that if prior to 2022 we were considering the process of European integration as a kind of indefinite process of enlargement in which new countries will be joining without clearly defining where these lines ending the enlargement will need to be drawn. Today, I think that it is much more apparent that there is a need for a redefinition of how Europe will look like and what will be the ultimate end of the process of enlargement. Integral part of this process will be the membership of the countries from the Western Balkans. As we know, in the waiting room, now there are also Ukraine, Moldova. Georgia decided to leave this waiting room, at least for now. And we also have the question of Turkey. We could hear Erdogan yesterday claiming that the membership in the EU is still a strategic goal, but this process literally stalled over the last 7 years. So if there is anything that is important in the context of the Western Balkans, it is the fact that leaving them outside the EU creates a potential for third players, including Russia, China, the countries from the Persian Gulf and Turkey, to play their own political games, own presence in the region that can cause unexpected turbulences for the EU itself. And in that sense, the membership of these countries in the European Union should be considered as a priority.
Understood, but being a member of the EU, of course, is no guarantee that outside players are not going to try and influence them. You take, of course, Hungary comes to mind, but Romanian elections, for example. So being in the EU by itself is not a protection against third-party influence. The Chinese are investing in factories in Hungary. So, I still fail to see what the challenge is or that is overcome by membership of the Balkan states into the European Union.
Well, let's put it that way. On one hand, of course, I can agree with you that we see that, of course, Chinese assertiveness is present in Hungary, and we see the Russian impact on the elections in Romania. I would go further to give examples also from other countries of the region. But what is the element that unites all these countries are the shared rules of the game. And even if you have some players that sometimes try to disregard the rules, eventually they need to make a choice whether they want to play according to the same rules and be part of the game, or just to end up outside of the game. And this is what is the added value of the potential membership of these countries from the Western Balkans in the European Union. And now, answering the second part of your question, the problem with the Western Balkans is much more serious. And I think that this summit is important for one particular reason. We're finally after the process of nomination of the new European Commission, and we also need to see and hear what will be the incentive for these relations between the EU and the Western Balkans. So far, there is no enthusiasm, and there is a huge hope that this summit might show a new type of direction or new type of incentive for dynamization of this relationship. Why? Because despite all the challenges that we face, we see that on one hand, the countries of the Western Balkans are already a little bit tired. We should remind that for 20 years they are in the waiting room, and that's quite a long period of time. One generation waiting and hoping to become member. On the other hand, in the European Union, we have internal challenges. We don't know exactly what will be the future shape of the integration process, and that further discourages countries from paying attention to enlargement. This environment was additionally shocked by the geopolitical challenges.
Understood. But here's the thing. You talk about people being impatient. Now, Serbia has been in the waiting room for a while. But we've already seen very clearly that President Vučić is very pro-Russian, and that's reciprocated. Now, Prime Minister Tusk had a meeting with President Vučić, and President Vučić did not attend the BRICS summit. Is there a connection between the two events?
Well, let me put it that way. We didn't heard much about the consequences of Tusk's visit to Serbia. From our perspective, it was a very important visit for one simple reason. Poland will be presiding the Council of the European Union from January, and I think that part of this visit was to sense what are the trends, the tendencies in Belgrade, and whether the enlargement portfolio should be part of the Polish presidency. Initially, that was the argument. Now, what we hear is exactly that much more security than enlargement is considered as a priority. On the other hand, Serbia is indeed, I could argue that in this group of countries in the waiting room, it is the renegade. One of the enormous pressures that is currently exerted on Belgrade is to align with the EU's foreign policy towards Russia and to join the sanctions, but this is not necessarily taking place.
Understood. Now, Prime Minister Tusk seems quite bullish, actually, about Serbia's membership, and he seems very keen to promote it. What influence does he have over the way in which Serbia changes its attitude, perhaps its internal structures, to align with the EU?
Well, we have to be very careful in investing any hopes that Prime Minister Tusk can have an impact on President Vučić, on the way how Serbia behaves in international relations. What the European Union can only do is it can signal what are the expectations in order to have rapprochement with the Serbian authorities. But what we see is actually a challenge in three dimensions. The first one, as I already mentioned, is the non-alignment of Serbia with the EU policy towards Russia. The second one is we need to remember that Serbia is an extremely important element of this Western Balkans puzzle, and unfortunately it has its own regional priorities that in a sense collide with the concept of European integration. And last but not least, at home, Vučić presents a kind of political model that really departs from the European expectations when it comes to political values.
Understood.
Yeah,
Mr. Domaradzki, unfortunately, I am sorry to have to interrupt you there, but we have run out of time. We would love to have you back to continue this conversation. Thank you very much for your analysis. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye. And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.